Okay, Justin, why don't we go ahead and we'll get started. I think everybody else will probably be watching it on recording, or they'll hop in and can get caught up at that point.
All right, that sounds good. We'll jump into the discussion then. Appreciate the opportunity to talk with you tonight. My name is Justin Dye. I work with Honeywell, specifically one of the businesses that's called Honeywell Connected Plant. But we're going to talk a little bit today about Honeywell generally, and then talk a little bit about aerospace, which is where I've spent the majority of my time. This new organization called Honeywell Connected Plant is just about 3 weeks old, so we're not quite sure what we're going to be when we grow up yet. So we'll talk aerospace. I graduated from the W.P. Carey School of Business in 2005. Seems like a long, long time ago, with a dual degree, an MBA, and the MSIM, the Master of Science in Information Management. Before that point, I sold heavy-duty truck parts and operated heavy equipment, drove long-haul truck for a little while, decided that maybe pushing a pencil would be better than pushing a gear stick, and it seemed to be significantly better. In fact, I have degrees from Boise State and Utah State University as well, if anybody's interested in such a thing. Any questions that you've got, please interrupt as we go through here. Again, we'll cover a little bit about Honeywell and talk about what Honeywell is and what they do. And then we'll spend just a little bit of time about my experience within Honeywell. Before Honeywell, before grad school, I spent time in small businesses, had a couple of my own businesses, and Honeywell is not a place, quite honestly, I thought I would be long-term. It was my first adventure into a Fortune 100 company, and it has provided me enough opportunity to stay interested that I just haven't felt the need to change at this point. So we'll go over this a little bit today. So thanks again for your time and for having me on. And if you've got any questions, ask now, or you can reach out to me via email, justin.dye@honeywell.com, or I'm on LinkedIn as well. So talk just a little bit about some of the things here. We're not going to wade through every one of these slides. You can download this actually from the investor section of the Honeywell.com website, but we will talk a little bit about some of the things that Honeywell believes in, some of the things that they do, and some of the value that they bring to both shareholders and the businesses they support. The concept of integrity and compliance is quite high on the list of things that Honeywell wants to emphasize. Again, this is a slide deck that is for anybody to consume, but the fact that it's the first thing we talk about, even above and beyond share price or earnings per share or the business itself, is this idea of integrity and compliance. And that is necessary for a large part of our business. Being an aerospace business, compliance is key. We serve a lot of defense and space customers. We serve multinational organizations, including governments, and we have to make sure that we are in alignment with all of these different requirements. Sometimes that seems to be burdensome, but at the end of the day, one has to make a decision. What do they want to be, and who do they want to be when they grow up? Honeywell's continuing to grow, and one of the things that Honeywell does want to be is an ethical company. Are we driving the right behaviors through the organization? Are we building products that support growth strategies across all the segments that we support? As listed here, headquartered in Morris Plains, New Jersey, in the United States, right around 131,000 employees worldwide. A couple of years ago, Honeywell was rebranded to be the Power of Connected, and this is in alignment with the investments that have been made across Honeywell with connectivity, certainly within an enterprise such as a connected plant or in a connected aircraft. Honeywell had a big investment in getting wireless to your aircraft with some of the partnerships they've got there. If you've flown on an aircraft recently and you've had Wi-Fi on that aircraft, there's a good chance that Honeywell was a part of that experience. The organization itself is made up of a good chunk of engineers and technologists, 22,000 of that 131,000, 11,000 software developers around the world. Those are headquartered truly all over the world. We do have a software center in Atlanta, Georgia in the USA, but we have a good portion of people in India, Bangalore, Chennai, and Hyderabad, as well as the Czech Republic, and scattered throughout the rest of the world. 150 different research and development facilities around the world, and many, many patents out there in the environment today that both on aircraft and connected plant. One of the things that Honeywell is most famous for is the little round thermostat. I doubt that many of you have even seen those or remember those, but that was a big thing back in the 50s and 60s. Honeywell has been part of innovation and efficiencies since it started. As listed on the bottom, when we talk about the power of connected, we're talking about connected aircraft, connected buildings, connected home, connected plant, connected workers, and the connected supply chain. These are all places that Honeywell now plays and will be the growth for Honeywell going forward. Aerospace is the biggest single business that Honeywell has. 14.8 billion in sales. This is across 3 different segments. ATR, which is called Air Transportation and Regional. These are the big planes, Boeing and Airbus. Also something called Business and General Aviation, which is the smaller planes. Some of you with your private jets, like your Gulfstream 650s, that's Business and General Aviation. And then Defense and Space. Home and Building Technologies, based in Atlanta, as listed there, the third biggest one that's in the mix. And this is security and energy use, energy efficiency, software and tech to make sure that plants are running as efficiently as they can. Performance Materials and Tech out of Morse Plains, about a $10 billion business. These folks actually build molecules that go into chemicals. The molecules themselves are sold or mixtures are sold. This is really a process engineering organization. And then Safety and Productivity Solutions out of South Carolina. This is all about making sure workers are safety oriented, personal protection and things like that. A little bit about sales. We talked a little bit about this before. A very good pattern on the EPS and free cash flow, as well as segment margin across the organization here. $40.5 billion. That's a lot of zeros, and it's a bit hard to get your head around. The more important part of the story here is really around earnings per share and the free cash flow growth, which has enabled acquisitions and continue investment in the company itself. Pretty impressive growth pattern from 2013 to 2017, driven largely by efficiencies throughout the organization and good organic sales. It's been kind of interesting to see Honeywell grow in this arena across the board. When I started at Honeywell, share price was south of $50 a share, and now we're above 150 depending upon the day. And this is really due to a very, very strong portfolio and efficient management of the cash that we've got. Just a little bit here, there's a process that runs the organization called HOS, the Honeywell Operating System, which is a riff on the Toyota production system. And this is really about making sure the organization itself is tight together. And when we talk about the culture of an organization and what the culture of Honeywell is, this is a huge part of the culture. This is really making sure that the entire organization is aligned to the same set of goals, making sure that the entire organization understands what's expected of them, and then just as importantly, making sure the organization has an escalation path to make sure things are addressed quickly. The concepts of agile and velocity product development, the concepts of Lean and Six Sigma help to drive improvements in working capital and commercial excellence. This is something that our old CIO, Dave Cody, focused on heavily, and I think was one of the main things that helped drive value to Honeywell. GE was a darling of Wall Street for quite a while, and Honeywell was a bit of a byword. That, of course, is a different story today, and is due largely because of this cultural shift to focusing on the operating system, which again ties everybody from the bottom up in an operating system that allows for escalation, transparency, and accountability. So we talked a little bit about the connectivity piece. And again, we talked about some of the different connecteds that we have in the world. There are a lot of big numbers here with regards to what connected means. And there's been a pivot over the last, I would say, 18 or 24 months with regards to what Honeywell does, where before we built hardware, we built parts, we shipped parts, we repaired parts. Really, we're moving now to certainly still building and shipping and repairing parts, but trying to understand what else does a customer need to improve their business, to improve their margin, to operate more efficiently, to operate more safely. And a lot of that comes down to making sure that the part that we have enables the user of the part to do their job better. And that usually includes some piece of data that they've never had before. With connected aircraft, as an example, certainly it includes things like having a Wi-Fi on the plane, but it also includes analytics to be able to give to a flight department to say, look, in 4 more starts, your engine is going to need a new starter. So the prognostics and the predictive analytics are all part of the connected aircraft. That same thing applies to connected buildings. Look, you've got some sensor that seems to be acting in a way that's outside of specifications. This is the data that you're going to need to address that. This is potentially some of the things that you can do to improve that situation. The connected concept is really moving away from just parts and pieces and products and moving more towards how can we enable the customer to do better with the environment that they're operating in. Big growth opportunity here. Most of the big industrials are moving forward with some kind of a connected strategy. This is certainly not unique to Honeywell, but I would say where we are unique is as a conglomerate, a multinational conglomerate, we can touch many parts in many industries, and that gives us some economy of scale to work with our clients. The hometowns, just another little bit about Honeywell with regards to the culture, this concept of hometown solutions. This is an investment that Honeywell makes in the local communities that Honeywell has people. It's listed here 5 things there: family and security, habitat and conservation, science and math, humanitarian relief, and then housing and shelter. When Puerto Rico was slammed by the hurricane a couple of years ago, there were lots of dollars and lots of help sent that way. We actually sent one of the test planes down to Puerto Rico for the Honeywell people working there that had Wi-Fi connected so that the Puerto Rico folks could continue to go to work, could contact their families stateside, and generally just make their lives just a little bit better. And this is part of what we do for one another as Honeywell employees. Big investment in STEM, science, tech, engineering, and math. Focus largely on as listed there, the Honeywell Leadership Challenge Academy and the Educators at Space Academy, which sends teachers to, used to be NASA's, wherever they can get into at this point, but helps them understand better how they can educate their students in STEM verticals. So that's a pretty exciting piece of the world. When I came into Honeywell in 2004, one of the first things that was done for that class that I came in with was a service project in Morristown at the time in New Jersey. And it was certainly, a meeting of look, here's what we expect of you over the next 3 to 5 to 7 years. But it was also, hey, we've got an opportunity to go down and assist a nonprofit organization with redevelopment of a home. So we went down and did some basic carpentry and some painting. The fact that that was part of that agenda, I thought was a pretty interesting thing. And I thought that was a neat thing for me, a good fix for where I like to spend some time too. W.P. Carey had a similar idea, doing good while doing well. And I thought that was always an interesting approach, and I'm glad that Honeywell approaches that as well.
Yeah, Justin, can I ask you a quick question?
Absolutely.
That's really cool that they do that. If for people that work there, do they also give you time to dedicate to your own community service? So like a certain amount of hours that you can work paid, or you know what I mean, or just hours that you can take off to do your own community service?
That's a really good question, and I don't know. I will look into that and send you an email on it. I know that I've never had a manager tell me, no, don't go volunteer, but I don't know if there's allotted time off to do that. Fair question. Let me answer that for you tomorrow.
Cool, thanks.
Just a couple of little interesting facts on this one. Every 5 seconds, somewhere around the world, somebody's landing with Honeywell wheel and brake. That tells you a couple of things. One, that's a lot of airplanes flying around the world. Secondly, Honeywell is one of just a few people that do wheels and brakes. It's kind of an interesting business. The wheels and brakes are steel and fiber, carbon fiber, and they basically spin the carbon fiber in a big cylinder, and the carbon settles down on these discs, and they grind it and then repeat the process all again, called carbon deposition. Very interesting process, and that's quite honestly one of the fun things about Honeywell Aerospace proper is the technology and the product that we're working on is just fascinating, interesting stuff. 40 semi-trucks from 60 miles per hour to 0. That's the energy that is required to absorb a wide-body airliner. So a wide-body would be a multi-aisle, such as a 777 or a 380, a 747. Big airplanes, big energy required to stop the things. Again, understand how quickly these things are coming in, how much they weigh, and how quickly they stop. It's an amazing feat of engineering. Lots of dollars simply just to maintain wheels and brakes annually, billions of dollars just on wheels and brakes. Again, absorb that. Aerospace is an interesting market for companies to play in but it requires huge investment up front to develop a new wheel and brake or a new engine or a new cockpit. And the payback period is decades. You know, we may spend billions of dollars, multiple billions of dollars developing a new engine with the expectation that we don't break even until year 22. So good business if you're in, but certainly does have some barriers of entry that have to be overcome. That trend is changing a little bit, obviously, when folks like Elon Musk and the CEO of Amazon figure that, you know what, the only barrier to entry is money. And they have lots and lots of money. They can buy engineers, they can buy expertise, and they're doing things in aerospace that are just fascinating. Absorb the fact that we can now, as the human race, launch a rocket from a floating platform in the ocean and then land that rocket back on the same platform. That's just absolutely stunning. It's a fascinating thing. A couple of little factoids here. Again, we're not going to go through every one of them, but it's kind of an interesting place to play within aerospace. All the businesses have interest. Aerospace to me is the most interesting just because airplanes are cool. I think that's a lot of fun. More little facts here. Interesting thing with connected aircraft, we talked a little bit about how that helps. The global flight delays cost about $25 billion a year to airlines. And now, it's kind of an interesting thing. In theory, if we could fix that $25 billion, does that mean they would quit charging me for extra bags? The answer is probably no. They would not stop doing that. But these operators are certainly concerned with flight delays, and that's why these predictive and prognostic analytics are very, very important. The data that comes off these engines, our engineers have used for years to improve the engine, but we've never turned it back to the operators to say, look, this is potentially 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 of the ways you could operate your aircraft differently to get better efficiencies. That's the power of this connected aircraft. It's a fascinating place to operate and work every single day. Aerospace is here in the US, 4,400 software engineers, about 11,000 engineers and technologists, 35,000 employees. And again, this is here in Phoenix, Arizona, where this is based. We're gonna skip through some of these here going pretty quickly. Aerospace is not a bad margin business, bit of a working capital sink because you have to have a lot of inventory to support some of these long life cycle products, but overall an interesting place to play. Largely focused around the cockpit, which is electronic solutions, the engine and the APU. The APU is the thing in the back of the plane that provides energy while the plane is on the ground. And then mechanical systems and components. As odd as it sounds, things like toilet flush valves, very, very important on an international flight. We like to make sure those things work. That's the other roughly 25% there. The verticals we play in include a little bit about this, the US and defense and space market, the international defense and space, and then the commercial OEMs make up the rest of the marketplace. As mentioned, there's a long life cycle on these aircraft parts. And one of the business models that's used within aerospace is you'll give away the engine and get first right of refusal on all spares or repairs. Because an aircraft is in service for such a long time, you get a pretty good return on investment if you're willing to absorb those billions of dollars up front. Additionally, some of these engines, all of the engines in fact, are based somewhat on the razor blade model, wherein you'll sell the engine and then repair the blades that make the turbine engine actually work. Lots of money tied up in those as well. So that aftermarket business is listed there under verticals is a pretty good chunk of the overall market, and we watch that very, very closely with regards to what that market happens to be doing at any given time. Lots and lots of words here. We're certainly not going to go over that, but the thing to take away within aerospace is it's broken down into products at the end of the day. Electronic solutions is your cockpits, engines and power systems would be engines and APUs. Mechanical components, we've talked about that. This is the valves and the actuators on the wings. When you look out the window at the wing, you can see it moving up and down. That's an actuator. Transportation systems would be turbos based in Torrance, California, and then services and connectivity, which was recently spun off into this brand new business, is all about making sure that we have services that support the connected aircraft. And then a great big organization, of course, supporting the rest of Honeywell Aerospace. This is pretty typical of, I think, most big businesses. But quite honestly, was a bit of an odd experience for me to learn how to play here. Again, I came from a very, very small business where I was one tier removed from the actual owner of the business. The owner of the business would come in and say, look, we've got a quarterly target of of some number, and then we were all expected to do whatever we could do to go hit that number. In a heavily matrixed organization, which Honeywell is, I've got at least one direct manager, but then several matrix managers. And what I mean by that is I might report in this organization directly services and connectivity, but if I'm doing a project, I'm going to have given project leadership from the supply chain or from the sales folks, from customer product support, all of which are my short-term management tiers. That's a dotted line matrix organization, heavily matrixed, truly heavily matrixed organization. Whenever we do mid-year reviews or year-end reviews, we get feedback from these matrix managers, and it can be, depending on the number of projects you've done, 5 or 6 different managers throughout the course of the year, which is fun because you learn more parts of the business, but it can be a challenge. Certainly learning what it is they want from you and what they need for them to be successful. So I don't expect this is so different from any other big organization, but certainly for me, coming from the land of small business ownership and small businesses, this was hard to get used to. One good thing that I've liked about Honeywell and aerospace more specifically is the C-level folks are always open to a discussion. If you can get on their calendar, they will talk. I've never been turned down for an informational interview, or quite honestly, even walking down the hall as we run into one another going to lunch, to simply ask a question. They're all very transparent, all very forward in their ideas. Nobody's hiding behind anything. I've never had an executive in Honeywell try to turn me away from a given question, which I've appreciated as I've learned one, to ask better questions, and certainly to do my own reading to understand maybe what the strategies might happen to be.
Now, do they tend to take criticism well? Like, do you feel like you're able to voice your opinion if you disagree with, say, a vice president or a president?
Absolutely. Yeah, unequivocally. The way that I've had experience within Honeywell is as strategy is being developed or a plan is being developed, all offers are on the table. Everybody needs to have a voice and everybody needs to pipe in. However, when a strategy has been selected, that's the strategy. There's no more arguing at that point. We need to all hitch up and pull. That said, the concept of HOS, the Honeywell operating system, is based on continuous improvement. So if something feels like it's not working right, the expectation is you voice them. You voice that concern. And additionally, the expectation is also you voice an idea of how this might be better. The CIs, or continuous improvement opportunities, are floated up as high as the organization as they need to be and are actually awarded. The best CI in a given function is usually awarded every quarter. So I have yet to run into anybody that says, I'm the president and you need to do what I say because I'm the president. I've never had that experience, ever.
That's awesome.
It's a great opportunity, quite honestly, to learn and to understand what these folks think. Quite honestly, what I've learned, and again, this is just probably my experience, but I found out that when I disagree or when I don't understand, it's generally because I don't have all the information that they have. And that's reasonable. I don't expect to know everything that the CEO or a vice president knows. I have my world to maintain, they have theirs. And I've also been given opportunities to learn what I need to learn to know what they know. Again, there's nothing hiding. Certainly things like mergers and acquisitions and some of the top secret stuff we're working on, they're not going to share, but never has anybody said, I'm the boss, just go do it.
Awesome, thank you.
Absolutely. A little bit about the business here again. We can talk ad nauseum about these. We're not going to go too far into these, but we talked a little bit about them. Every bit of this portfolio relies heavily on engineering. It's a fascinating place to play because you might talk to some engineer that has worked for 35 years simply on the leading edge of a blade, of a fan blade. That sounds tedious and incredibly boring on one aspect, but incredible when you start to talk to some of these folks with regards to the passion that they have for the product, the passion they have for the science, the continuous learning that they have to do to make all of this work. It's amazing, absolutely amazing to see things like differential equations actually being used at work. I swore I would never find a use for those, and quite honestly, I haven't, but certainly engineers use this stuff every day. It's great. It's a cool place to work. Lots of customers here, and again, some of this might not make a lot of sense, but from an airline's point of view and from a customer point of view, this just shows the opportunity space within aerospace alone. If you have an interest in working and supporting the armed forces, there's opportunity to play there. If you have interest in working for private aviation or commercial aviation, opportunities there. The products that aerospace makes span all of these markets around the world. I had a role in product management for 4 years, and I spent a fair amount of time traveling around the world talking to different airlines, Singapore Air, India Air, China Eastern, and then certain folks like Southwest and Delta, to understand what kind of opportunities Honeywell might have on their next generation aircraft. And it's a neat opportunity to learn about other businesses, learn about other business models, learn about what operators need. And the great thing about that, of course, is you learn that, as cliche as this is, it's absolutely positively true. People are pretty much the same wherever you go. And what they want at the end of the day is to go home relatively happy to whatever they're defining as their family. They want to be safe at home. They want to have an experience that helps them improve. And Honeywell's a pretty good part of that. Well, again, we're going to skip through a good chunk of this. A lot of the marketing swag, y'all can read this on your own as required. Any questions with the aerospace piece? Or Honeywell generally? All right, we'll move on to just a little bit about my journey within aerospace, or excuse me, within Honeywell. My path has been a bit meandering. I've taken roles that have been across functions, and I've taken roles that have given me opportunity with promotion. I've taken steps down to get new roles and new functions, and ultimately have been given these opportunities as I've wanted them. The good thing about working for a big organization is every couple of years you can jump to a different function or a different sales team or a different product family, and quite honestly be working for a nearly new company. So much new to learn. And that's been my experience. I actually joined Honeywell Aerospace in 2004 as an intern out of the MBA program during the second year of my MBA program in IT, and my job there was disaster recovery planning. We had just had a huge storm in Arizona, and one of the data centers actually went thermal. One of the things that I had never thought about, and apparently Honeywell didn't either, is we had backup on the servers, but no backup for the air conditioning. So the servers kept pumping out heat, and the AC was down. Lots of things went thermal, and it was not a very, very good situation. So my first job as an intern was to go through and understand the time to thermal requirements, but then also make recommendations on what might we do from a disaster recovery plan point of view. From there, I got a full-time offer in IT and worked as an IT analyst for the supply chain, which meant understanding migration paths for servers, understanding requirements for business apps, getting a start on some of the readiness for SAP implementation from their current MRP. I did that for 3 years and then jumped into an opportunity that I had to be involved with SIOP, sales and operations planning. The I in this case is inventory, sales, inventory, and operations planning. As an analyst initially, but then jumped into a management role where I had that process ownership for 4 sites, and then eventually jumped up to a director role in SIOP, managing the entire process for all of aerospace. The background that I had from the WP Carey School of Business was helpful to give me the role and taught me some of the basic things that I had to know. I had no idea how to read an income statement, as an example. I could barely spell standard deviations. That was a good baseline for me. Quite honestly, the information management degree that I also got has been most helpful in getting me my next role. That understanding of core systems, the understanding of architecture has allowed me to at least talk to the folks that are tactically building this. One of the things that's been learning for me, of course, is well, I guess not of course, but one of the things that I've learned with this is a business administration degree means you're administering business. You're by definition a generalist in a lot of cases. And in an organization as big as Honeywell, that can be leveraged if you're willing to learn and go deep as required. And that's certainly what I was able to do for the first several years. I had an opportunity to get out of the SIOP game after several years and jump into a product management role. That was interesting to me because the product managers within Honeywell actually own the profit and loss for their given product. And that was an interesting opportunity. I hadn't, to point, had that opportunity. So I took a step down from title, from director to senior manager, retained wage, which was a good thing, but took a title bump and was able to manage an in-flight entertainment and cabin refurbishment business for private jets. Small portfolio, but allowed me to talk to folks that I'd never talked to before. And that private jet market's an interesting one. I can tell you that I was shocked to hear that for a given private jet, for one of the clients, the platinum plating budget alone was $12 million. How does somebody that used to operate heavy equipment go and talk to an owner like that and understand what it is they want in their daily tasks? It was a hard thing for me to get my head around with regards to user experience. But that's part of the fun of working for a big organization like Honeywell, is stretching past what you know and understanding, trying to understand what it is you can do to help people with whatever it is they need help with. After a couple of years, that portfolio grew upon my recommendation from simple cabin entertainment to in-flight connectivity and information systems. With that increase, my portfolio went from $5 million to about $180 million in revenue, and managed certainly the cabin still, but then managed all of the connectivity pieces associated with the product line, and then the information systems, which is the things like the black boxes that you hear about, the cockpit recorders, the voice recorders. That was also in my portfolio. Things like printers and information system servers. Interesting opportunity to understand and make decisions with regards to profitability. There are lots and lots of decisions that have to be made that I never realized would have to be made. As an example, one can go talk to a customer and get a list of 15 things that they would love to see in their next cockpit recorder. And then on one side of the house, you're thinking it's a cockpit recorder. How can there possibly be 15 things that they want to see on these new devices? But as you talk to them, you start to see, okay, that can make some sense. One then has to go back with the engineers and start to prioritize them and understand how much is this going to cost? What can we charge for this? What's the willingness to pay? What's the next best alternative? All of these things were learning for me. I didn't have any formal training in this. But again, that's the value of somebody like Honeywell, somebody big within Honeywell. They give you a chance to learn. They give you a chance to be successful, and can coach as you are inevitably fail. After several years running that product line, I jumped into an opportunity, really a ground floor opportunity, to stand up an analytics organization. So I'd spent some time, certainly as an IT analyst and in my SIOP role, standing up business intelligence organizations to do reporting and metrics. SIOP is heavily data reliant, but it's certainly reactive in nature. This new organization that was stood up to be forward thinking, to be predictive, prognostic, if we can get there. And that sounded interesting to me. I have no experience with data science. I'm not a statistician, but was given the opportunity because I played across a good chunk of the functions within Honeywell Aerospace. Having been here now for quite a while, this has been learning as well, because the concept of data science has been new to Honeywell Aerospace. One might go into a plant and say, hey, look, we think we can solve this problem. And they'll look at you and they say, one, who are you? And two, what makes you think you can do this where we have never been able to figure this out? And part of the job is to talk to them about, well, this is why what we're doing is significantly and fundamentally different than anything Honeywell has ever done before. Have learned a whole new language with regards to what data scientists talk about, how different data engineers are from normal data as subject matter experts. It has been a fascinating role. Of all the roles I've done, I would say this analytics role has been the most fascinating for me, simply because it's been the most learning. Something new to learn every single day, whether it's some new random forest model that I have to get smart on, or understanding very deeply how a given process works so that I might understand how that might be improved. How one might interview, how someone in my position might interview a data scientist. We had one data scientist coming in who was a PhD in astrophysics that worked at NASA. And they give me his resume and I'm thinking to myself, how in the world do I interview this guy? I don't even know where to start. And so you go to Google and Google tells me these are some of the things one might ask, but the reality is what I'm there for is the behavioral portion of the interview anyway. And that's part of the fascination, again, with Honeywell, is just surrounded by incredibly intelligent people, brilliant people, brilliant engineers, brilliant operations people that are excited to be part of the business. And that's been a fun part of the Honeywell experience for me. So that's about what I've got to share tonight. I don't need to bore you with any more PowerPoints. Are there any questions with my experience with Honeywell or Honeywell generally?
I was wondering, because I mean, all these positions to me kind of sound intimidating. Like, how much of, starting at a company like that is like learning on the job? And, were you really confident starting out with, that problem with the air conditioning as one of your first assignments as an intern?
I was scared to death. And there's no doubt about it. I mean, I didn't have any classes that said this is how you do time to thermal conditions in a data center with a raised floor. I had no idea how to do that. But the cool thing about Honeywell, at least for me anyway, is they give you this and they say, look, this has never been done before. Here are 6 people that might understand how they can help with this, but you've got the internet, go figure it out. And then they expect you to go figure it out. That autonomy has been wonderful for me. The expectation is I'm going to get it done. But they also have provided mentors through the organization. And then getting back to the fact that I've never been turned down for an informational interview, it's scary and it's learning, but there's all kinds of opportunity to actually do the learning and to succeed. The most stressful role I've had has been in the product management piece, because you're actually on the hook for profit and loss. And if revenue is not coming in, you got to answer why. And quite honestly, the revenue is not coming in because I told you 4 years ago I need money for new investment. I can't do anything about it. I told you 4 years ago that if we don't fund this particular unit, we are going to we're not even going to be the second or third next best alternative. We're going to be failing in the market, and that's going to be worth $13 million to you. So I had to be smart enough to think that ahead. I had to be smart enough to understand, what is my loss position going to be? Is it 13 million? Is it 14 million? Is it 80 million? And then I had to be courageous enough to stand up and say, look, there's nothing I can do about this. And those are hard discussions, quite honestly, but that's, again, part of the growth. One thing that I've appreciated with Honeywell is they generally keep it professional. I've never heard anybody say, this is failing because you're a horrible manager. It's generally, well, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Have you done this? Maybe you could have escalated this sooner. But absolutely, it's intimidating as can be. All of these roles are scary to start with. And there's a lot of studying that goes on. Even with this data science role, I spend 2 hours every day in learning. And I can do that because our VP has straight up said that. You need to be spending an hour to 2 every single day reading and learning. Just part of our culture.
At your business, well, because of what you guys do you find the business analytics certification to be something that would help me get into a place like that? So I'm looking at like supply chain operations efficiencies. Do you guys, when you're hiring at your company, do you have any idea if that's something that they kind of look for that would really benefit?
It depends on what organization specifically you're getting into and where in analytics you want to play. If you're playing in BI, business intelligence, none of the certs are going to help you much. If you're looking for analytics and supply chain, quite honestly, the supply chain certs are going to help you way more than any analytics cert are going to help.
Okay.
Realistically, what we're looking for, and we interview this way now, there's a behavioral interview that you come in, but then there's also a technical interview. And we sit you down. If you're a data scientist, we sit you down with a problem and we say, I need you to solve this with Python, or I need you to solve this in R. What models would you use? Talk me through how you're going to solve for over or under fitting. Why did you use that model versus this model? If you're talking about business intelligence, one of the things that we did just very simply in the past is we would give you a record, a big spreadsheet, a 30 meg spreadsheet that had maybe 100 columns and 40,000 rows. And we would say, I need you to tell me the top drivers by customer, by site. So basically, if you could build a pivot table, you could answer that question.
Right.
Very basic, but quite honestly, a lot of people can't do that. So it was just an immediate way to fix that problem.
Gotcha. Okay.
So we haven't used many of the certs. Certainly for the data science piece, masters in statistics or data science is minimum to compete. And quite honestly, we're hiring a lot of PhDs. But for the junior level folks coming in, certainly if you're just looking like as an undergrad coming in to the supply chain to help with some of the ops, that's supply chain experience and really knowing how to manage Excel and access databases, one of the strongest things you can have.
Okay, perfect, thanks. Anybody else got any more questions for Justin while he's here? And Justin, I put your email in the chat, so if anybody wants to write that down, if you get questions, it's right there for you. Okay, well, Justin, thank you so much for your time. That was really interesting. I'm pretty surprised myself. I didn't really expect uh, that Honeywell did so much. I kind of only thought of them as far as aerospace specifically. So it was really interesting to hear about them and hear about all of your experience. So thank you so much for coming and spending your time to help us and help people kind of figure out where they want to go career-wise. Would you mind if people were to add you on your LinkedIn?
No, absolutely not. And if you, please do, in fact, and if you've got any questions, I can try to answer them. If you want any other context with any of the other Honeywell businesses, please do let me know there as well. I do recommend, if you're interested in Honeywell, go check out the investor tab on the honeywell.com website. There's a very, very good introduction across all of the businesses to help you get familiar with what it is Honeywell does.
Perfect. And I'll go ahead and I'll send that out when I send out the recording for everybody.
Sounds great.
All right. Well, we'll let everybody get going. So have a great night, everyone. And thank you for coming. And thanks again for Justin for being here.
Absolutely. Have a good evening.